Death has always been a boundary, an end, a point beyond which nothing returns. But what if that isn't entirely true? Ancient texts speak of people who saw something beyond. They came back, but they were never the same. Their words were recorded, and then erased, because what they described did not fit into reality. They spoke of a place without time, where thoughts take form, and where every entity knows everything about you. But the most terrifying part was this. They said, death is not an exit, it is an entrance. And once, someone didn't just see it, he brought it back. His death was not extraordinary. No prophecies, no signs, no strange events leading up to it. Just an ordinary day, an ordinary life that ended as suddenly as that of thousands of others. But the problem wasn't that he died. The problem was that he came back. The doctors called it a miracle. Clinical death lasted for several minutes. His heart stopped. Brain activity dropped to zero. But then, something changed. The monitor started beeping. The rhythm returned. His eyes opened. And at first, everything seemed normal. But only at first. He didn't panic. He didn't ask the usual questions. He didn't ask where he was, what had happened, or whether he was alive. No, his first words were, "It knows." No one understood what that meant. The doctors blamed it on stress, his family on shock. But the problem was that he kept repeating it. "It knows." Each time quieter, calmer, as if it wasn't fear, as if it was realization. A few hours later, he began to describe what he had seen. But it wasn't the usual light at the end of the tunnel or a feeling of peace. No, he spoke of space, without form, without boundaries, and at the same time, infinitely structured, as if every thought created a new reality, and every reality was watching him. He said that there was no body there, but you still exist, not as a human, as something that thinks. But the most terrifying part was something else. He said he was not alone, that there were others, and they didn't just exist. They were waiting. After he started speaking, the doctors didn't take it seriously at first. Cases like this had happened before. People who return from clinical death often describe strange sensations, visions, even entire worlds that feel real. It's usually attributed to the brain's response, final impulses, chaotic neural activity. But this was different. His words didn't sound like fantasy. They sounded structured. He wasn't just describing what he saw, he was explaining it as if it obeyed certain laws, as if it were a system. He said there was no randomness there, that every thought had weight, that every realization changed the space itself. At first he was drifting, without control, without direction. But then something changed. He said he understood the rule. As soon as he began to concentrate, the space around him started to change. Not like in a dream, much more precise. He thought of light, and light appeared. He thought of form, and form emerged. But it wasn't creation, it was discovery. As if all of it had already existed, he was simply beginning to see it. And that's when he realized he was being watched. Not by eyes, not by forms, but by something else. He couldn't describe it exactly, but he felt a presence. Not just one. Many. They didn't move, they didn't speak, they didn't interact directly. But they knew he was there. And they knew who he had been. He said that in that moment, he felt something strange, not fear, something deeper. As if his mind had been opened completely. Without protection, without boundaries, and everything he had ever thought became accessible, not only to him, to them. He tried to turn away, to stop thinking, to halt the process. But there, it was impossible, because thought is what you are. And the more he tried to hide, the clearer they saw him. So he did the only thing he could. He tried to focus on something singular, something stable. And he chose his name. He repeated it in his mind once, twice, a third time. And suddenly, something changed. The space around him began to contract. The light disappeared, forms collapsed, and those who were watching came closer. For the first time, he felt not just their presence, but a reaction, and it wasn't neutral. It was interest, as if he had done something he wasn't supposed to. And then the most important thing happened. He heard a response, not as a sound, not as words, but he knew exactly what it was. An answer to his name. And it was not his name. At first he thought it was just a reaction, a reflection of his own mind trying to make sense of something it couldn't understand. A projection, a defense mechanism, something familiar reshaped into something explainable. But the longer he stayed, the more impossible that explanation became. Because the response he felt wasn't his. It was too precise, too intentional. And most importantly, it was not limited to him. The presence that answered him did not speak in any human sense. There were no words, no language, no sound. But the meaning arrived fully formed, as if his mind had been bypassed completely. It didn't ask who he was, it already knew. Instead, it asked something else, something far worse. It asked, "Do you understand where you are?" And for the first time since entering that place, he hesitated. Because until that moment, he had been trying to interpret everything through the lens of being human. Through memory, through logic, through identity. But now, that framework began to collapse. Because the question itself implied something terrifying. That this place was not random, not chaotic, not a hallucination. It was designed. Or at least structured in a way that could be understood. He tried to answer, not with words, but with intention. No. The response came instantly, not aggressive, not emotional, not even judgmental, just absolute. "You're not supposed to." And suddenly everything around him shifted. The space that once felt infinite now felt layered, as if multiple realities were overlapping, existing in the same point, separated only by perception. He began to notice patterns, repeating structures that weren't visible before, movements that weren't movements, more like transitions between states. And within those patterns, he saw something that made everything worse. Others, not like him, not human, but aware, fully aware. And they were not discovering this place. They belonged to it. They moved through it with precision, without hesitation, as if they had always existed there. And as he watched them, he realized something else. They were not observing the space, they were observing him. The presence spoke again, this time closer. "You entered through termination." A pause then, "But you retained cohesion." He didn't understand the words fully, but he felt their meaning. Something had gone wrong. Or right. He wasn't supposed to remain himself here. He wasn't supposed to think, to observe, to question. And yet, he was. The presence continued. This creates a conflict. The patterns around him intensified. The structures became unstable. Reality, if it could even be called that, began to distort. And then he felt it, for the first time, not observation, not awareness, but attention.